they turned to me and said, okay, you're going first thing in the morning. Are you ready? And I was like, wait a second, a person just died, but we're still going flying? It wasn't until later when I really processed those emotions and thought, wow, somebody was actually trying to kill me. I was just ignoring it, focusing on my training and getting the mission done. They're not superheroes. They're not G.I. Joe action figures, but they're normal, everyday people, your neighbors, your brothers, your sisters, who've been put into some pretty harrowing situations. No, I don't miss it at all, but I do miss the people. We don't miss the job. We don't miss time away from family. We don't miss the sacrifice, but we miss hanging around with our friends. PTSD happens because we're asking humans to do unhuman-like things. I mean, it's not natural to want to hurt another human. I wish I could see the real human toll.
My voice in today's episode is powered by 11 Labs. Jack Stewart, you spent more than 20 years as a U.S. Navy fighter pilot, flew commercial aircraft after leaving active duty, and then became one of the rising voices in military thriller fiction. Your books are built around fighter aviation, special operations, loyalty, betrayal, and the hidden cost of service. But behind those stories is a real life spent around danger, responsibility, sacrifice, and people who carried far more than most civilians ever see. You have also stepped into major fictional worlds created by W.E.B. Griffin and Tom Clancy, which means you are not only writing your own stories, you are carrying worlds that already matter deeply to readers. Jack, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Jack, you've spent more than 20 years as a Navy fighter pilot before becoming a novelist. When did flying stop feeling like a dream and start feeling like responsibility?
I don't think it ever has stopped feeling like a dream, but it definitely started feeling like a responsibility when I realized that I had more than just myself that I needed to get to wherever I was going safely. And I had, over 100 people behind me that were relying on me to get them to their grandmas, to a wedding, to whatever. And so then it started to feel a little bit more serious.
Was flying something you always wanted to do?
Yeah, actually, my own dad was a pilot. He got his pilot's license when he was a teenager in Southern California, and just always aviation was always a part of my life growing up. I used to go flying with him before I could even see over the dash on the airplane. And so I knew I was going to go into aviation, but I really think it was probably when Top Gun came out that I thought I was going to be a naval fighter pilot. And unfortunately, I didn't have the hair to be like either Iceman or Maverick. So I'm kind of shooting for that old commanding officer that was chomping on a cigar at the beginning of the movie. That was the look I was going for.
My daughter has this. It's like a mini biography. It's made for kids. It's an Amelia Earhart bio with like cartoon pictures and stuff. It's actually it's really good, well done. But it talks about how like her entire life she knew she was going to fly. So now I just assume every pilot's entire life they knew they wanted to fly.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty safe assumption. Most people I fly with still that was kind of their lifelong ambition, but there are a few people that kind of come into it later in life. I mean, even those who don't pursue the path of being a pilot, I think a lot of people are just kind of naturally drawn to looking up in the sky and seeing the airplanes taking off or landing, or seeing them crossing the sky. And maybe later on in life they realize, yeah, I wonder if I could do that, and so they kind of get into aviation later.
Once the dream became real, you went to the Naval Academy and then into fighter aviation. Was there a moment early on when you realized this life was going to take more from you than you expected?
Yes. So I will say the Naval Academy, it was an unusual college experience. So it wasn't what most people experience through 4 years of university. And then flight school, I had a great time in flight school, but really the first thing that happened to me, where I really thought that, hey, this military aviation is completely different, was when I was going out to the aircraft carrier to land for the first time. They call it carrier qualifications. It happens in advanced jet training. And on my first day of my deployment, one of the instructors who had taught me how to fly that jet crashed into the water and died. And I wasn't flying. I wasn't flying that day. So we had a meeting that night. They brought all the instructors, all the students together. And in the back of my head, I'm thinking, well, that's it, right? They're calling it. We're going home. We'll come back another time. And they turned to me and said, okay, you're going first thing in the morning. Are you ready? And I was like, wait a second, a person just died, but we're still going flying. And that was kind of the first realization that military aviation was a little bit different than just normal aviation.
So what was that morning? What was that night's sleep like? Did you sleep at all?
I don't remember sleeping, but I do distinctly remember rolling in behind the ship for that first time and not. I couldn't tell you a single thing about it. It was just muscle memory. My hands and feet were doing everything that they taught me to do, but I didn't remember a thing until I landed. And when I landed and they pulled me off to the side and parked me and started giving me gas, I remember looking around going, I am on a boat in the middle of the ocean. Like, how did this happen? So, yeah,
Blacked out, blacked out for 12 hours.
yeah, something like that.
Later, a different kind of service shaped the writing. You have said your JSOC deployment pushed you from one day to today as a writer. What happened there that made waiting feel different?
For me, the JSOC deployment. So I went overseas and I was what's called an enabler. So I was in charge of providing air support to the task force as they're completing their mission. So think about all the special operators that are doing the missions that you see in the movies. And there was a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes. So I was in charge of logistics, so moving people and equipment around. I was in charge of ISR, so the intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance drones that were keeping an eye on the battlefield. And I was seeing a lot of other little jobs that are going on behind the scenes that that you don't really see a lot in the movies. You don't read a lot in the books, and I was seeing the sacrifices that people were making, myself included, by being away from my family to do this really noble mission. And I just thought, wow, these stories have to be told. And so I picked up the pen again and I really started writing, not to tell the stories that were factual, things that we were actually doing, but more or less the characters that I encountered and the people that I got to witness firsthand, and the heroics that they were accomplishing every single day. And so that deployment was pretty significant for me in terms of writing. And then once I started writing, more and more stories started coming out, and it's just I haven't stopped since.
I've asked my dad this before. Did you ever meet somebody and you're like, okay, you have to be a character in a story?
Yes, I have, and some of them have actually become characters in my books. But most of my characters are actually just kind of, a combination of multiple people. But yeah, there are definitely some characters, especially in the naval aviation community. We've got some real characters in that bunch.
Is it more fun writing a character of like you're saying, multiple people kind of combined, or making, and all these are obviously fictitious characters, but kind of basing it off of a person, or more fun starting from scratch?
Yeah, that's a tough one to say. I mean, I think if you build a character from scratch and you do it well, they become like a real person. And so you kind of can hear their voice, you can see their actions, just as if it was somebody you'd actually met. And so I kind of find that more fun. But still, when I include, real people in my books, I kind of giggle from time to time when I have them doing things that they either wouldn't do in real life, or that, our friends will find funny that I'm making them do. And so that's kind of fun too. But they're, creating in any manner, whether it's just right out of your imagination, or just being creative with a real person, is fun.
Yeah, there was my dad's first ever kids book was a series. It's called Football Genius, and it's a whole long story. But the one of the main characters is named Nathan. He was actually, it wasn't really Nathan. It was based on one of my buddies when I was younger. And there's things that he did that like me and all the people that knew him just thought were so funny that I don't know if readers, even realized what it was like, because it was just so, to us, it was just so real because we could see Nathan actually doing
Yeah.
that. And then there's actually, then there's the fun of totally creating somebody. And yeah, I don't know, I'm just curious.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Back in the cockpit, there is another pressure. Fighter pilots are often described as confident people. Was there ever a moment in the cockpit when your confidence was shaken?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that fighter pilots are given a bad rep by saying that we're confident people. I think we're probably some of the most, I don't know, self critiquing individuals. And so we are constantly trying to prove ourselves worthy to our peers and to others. And so there's a very common joke that the first rule of being a fighter pilot is to look cool. And if you look cool and you sound cool on the radio, then you're going to be okay. But yeah, everything we do. But I mean, I can give specific examples from the cockpit. Would be one time I had what we in the Hornet, it's called a bleed air warning. And a bleed air is when they take hot air from our engine and it passes through a bunch of things and it provides a bunch of cool features like oxygen that we breathe, pressurization for the cabin, and a whole host of other things. Well, if you have a leak and you get this warning, that leak could mean you are going to have a fire soon. And so the first thing you do is you shut off the bleed. And when you shut off the bleeds, you lose the oxygen that you're breathing. So you have to pull the emergency oxygen. And so there was one time I was coming back aboard the ship and I had the emergency oxygen because I had secured my bleed air and I was coming to land. And just as I'm getting ready to call the ball, my oxygen runs out. So instead of being able to take a breath like normal, I'm suddenly sucking on oxygen mask to my face. So I quickly just dropped the mask, shouted into the microphone, and tried to land. But there's so many times like that where you just, what am I doing? Am I doing this right? Am I doing this wrong? And I figure if you walk away from the jet at the end of the day, then you did okay. And that's kind of how I've taken it.
What do you think about that personality type, kind of the self-critic? Why do you think that works so well in aviation, or maybe is drawn to aviation?
Oh man, I mean, I think aviation inherently is a dangerous business. I mean, you hear about it all the time. It's still one of the safest modes of transportation. I will say that, but it's one of those things where if you make a mistake, either on the maintenance side, on the operating side, I mean, a plane crashes, people die, and so we have to be very critical of ourselves and we have to learn from our mistakes. In the Navy, we say that our procedures are written in blood because if we have a procedure that says you, for instance, you turn off the bleed air when you have a bleed air warning, it's because someone didn't do that, and it's because it caused a fire, and so we learn from it. And so you have to have that mentality of being critical of yourself, holding yourself accountable to high standards, and holding others accountable to those standards as well.
Your books move fast and feel very technical, but they are also about loyalty and betrayal. What made those themes so important to you?
Well, I grew up like many people in the genre. I grew up reading Tom Clancy. I grew up reading W.E.B. Griffin, Stephen Kuntz, Dale Brown, and one of the things that all those authors had in common was they were very technical. But more importantly, because no story can be good unless you have human emotion behind it. And so I focused more on the human element of it, just like I was talking about earlier with my JSOC deployment. I was talking about people who are not in the limelight and the things that they're doing, the sacrifices they're making. And so I think the human emotion is what drives a story forward. And in the military, where you rely on the person to your left and to your right, you have to trust them implicitly. And so loyalty is very important trait to have. And conversely, betrayal is like the worst thing imaginable. And so I do play around with those topics quite a bit. I like to obviously focus on the good guys that are very loyal to not only the oath that they take, but they're fellow servicemen and women. But then my bad guys are people who I think have maybe forsaken past oaths or are betraying somebody because I can't think of anything worse than that, to be honest with you.
When you write about betrayal, are you mostly imagining it or are you drawing from things you saw in real life?
Well, I think we've all experienced betrayal on some level, whether it be, somebody that you thought was your best friend in school and saying he was going to pick you for the kickball team and then he picked somebody else, or, you know, um, or something major where, I deployed with a person that was a naval officer who turned out to be selling secrets to the Chinese and knew that person and broke bread with that person. And so, yeah, I am drawing from personal experience, but I think it's one that everybody can sort of connect with. And in one of my books in particular, Silent Horizons, that one's with a Christian publisher, and I draw a lot on some of the betrayal that Jesus experienced from that. When he had the people he trusted the most. There was Judas that turned on him, and so yeah, so I do draw it from personal experience, but also some pretty compelling stories in history.
Is there like an eerie feeling to that? I always, I've had the kickball experience. I've never had a fellow officer selling secrets to the other team. But is there an eerie feeling to that? Like when you're with that person and then you find out and you kind of think back on what you said to them, what you didn't say to them, all that, or is it not that? It's kind of come and go.
No, I mean, it's a little eerie thinking about the fact that because you sort of go in naturally assuming, at least I do, I go in naturally assuming that everybody that I'm serving with is there for the same reasons and has the same motivations, and so when you learn that one of them doesn't, you're kind of like, "Oh, wait a second, they seemed normal, like I wouldn't have guessed that." Um, so yeah, it is a little bit eerie. But I think that's what makes at least my espionage stories so compelling to me is that, you know, one of the things that for instance, my Battleborn series, I talk a lot about domestic espionage, things that are going on in the United States today, because it is happening. I mean, and there are people, walking around the streets of San Diego or Los Angeles or New York or wherever that are running across foreign spies and don't even know it. But it is happening, and that's something that I wanted to shine a light on, in particular with that series.
You write about people making decisions under pressure. What did the military teach you about people when they are scared?
I mean, making a decision under pressure is something that you're trained to from day one. So, and I joke with my kids about this all the time because at the Naval Academy, we had to do these things called chow calls before every meal, where as a freshman, as a plebe, you would stand in the middle of the hallway and you would shout out this memorized saying that included the uniform of the formation, what the menu of the meal was, a bunch of other random facts, and you would have somebody in your ear screaming peanut butter, peanut butter, or some other crazy thing to try to make you, get distracted and lose focus. And so it taught you how to kind of push that distraction aside. It taught you how to push the stress of the situation aside and just focus on the task. And so, I mean, at the time I thought it was silly, but later on in life, I realized how important it is to be able to uh, basically understand the situation, um, take all the information in, and make a decision regardless of stress, regardless of fear. And that was one of the things that I noticed specifically about myself on combat missions, where I'd see missiles being shot at me, or anti-aircraft artillery being shot up at me. It wasn't until later when I really processed those emotions and thought, wow, somebody was actually trying to kill me. I was just ignoring it and focusing on my training and getting the mission done. And then later on, I could go back and look at it and say, okay, that was real.
I've got young kids, Jack. So, what are there things that you did with your kids to try and teach that kind of decision making under pressure? I feel like it's such a good life skill to have, but without them having to go be plebes and get screamed peanut butter in their ear?
I mean, I don't know. I think there are. I can't think of anything specifically that I did with my kids. I I go back. In fact, I met Admiral McCraven a couple of years ago, and he has a very famous speech that's on YouTube about waking up and making your bed, how he makes his bed. And I've shown that to my kids numerous times. So when I met Admiral McRaven, I told him, My kids hate you because I use you as the reason why they need to make their bed every morning." But so I did things that teach discipline, and decision making. But honestly, you have to allow them to make those mistakes because that's the only way you're going to learn in life is by making mistakes.
When veterans read your books, what do you most want them to feel you got right?
I think I want veterans to take away from my books the camaraderie, the the interpersonal relationships that they experienced in the military, and then also the sacrifice. So in my Silent Horizon series, I deal with that a lot, the sacrifice at home, because that was one thing that you never see it in military thrillers. Really, you never see you see this badass dude going, and doing amazing things overseas and killing a lot of people and blowing things up, but you never see the wife or the kids left behind that are, trying to struggle through life without an important person in their family. So I know in my own family, I left my wife behind. I left my three young kids behind to go do my job, and so I kind of wanted to shine a spotlight on that, the sacrifices that they make. And I think that that's what I want veterans to read when to take away from when they read my books is that it's a very authentic experience. It's not somebody that's just going out and doing something in a vacuum, but he has a wife, he has kids, he has other people who are relying on him, and they're making their own sacrifice.
Do you get a lot of feedback from veterans reading your books?
I do. I do get a lot of feedback. Usually, I mean, I'd say most of them are people that I serve with, and some of them just give me a hard time about maybe some of the technical accuracies of the book. But for the most part, they all can relate to it, and they say that it reads very real to them, and that's a huge honor.
I was going to ask if there are any themes that you'd see from a veteran reader versus just civilian readers.
I mean, I think civilian readers really dig the action. They really want to see the stuff blowing up and and the in the moment. But I think the military readers want to see what goes in before it and then after. So like how to prepare for that moment of excitement and then how to cope with it after. And so that's what I've, at least the most of the feedback I've received. That's kind of what I'm getting from people.
For people outside that world, the question is different. When civilians read your books, what do you most want them to understand about the people who serve?
I want civilians to realize that they're just like everyone else. They're not superheroes. They're not they're not GI Joe action figures, but they're normal everyday people. Your neighbors, your brothers, your sisters, who've been put into some pretty harrowing situations, and many of them have done some pretty incredible things. And that's in a way, I want them to realize that they also have that within themselves to do great things. So just because you wear a uniform doesn't make you a hero, and just because you have never served doesn't mean you don't have the capability or the ability to be one.
You later became an airline pilot. After years of military aviation, did civilian flying feel peaceful, or did it feel like something was missing?
Well, I when I left active duty in the military, I actually did not want to be an airline pilot because I thought it would be boring. At the time, I was much younger, and I thought that I needed to have that excitement every single day of my life, because I was used to strapping on an F-18 and flying supersonic and pulling 7Gs. But I realized that it can still be very rewarding and very fun, to fly a 737, and so I ended up, after going into business for a few years, realizing I didn't want to work for a living. I ended up pursuing going to work for the airlines, and it's been a fantastic career, and I love it. And I'm still flying as a captain now with Southwest, and still enjoy going to work and working with my fellow pilots and the flight attendants and getting to interact with passengers on a daily basis.
I've said this before, but it's you always want to see a veteran in the cockpit when you're getting on the flight. If he can fly with missiles being shot at him, we're gonna be just fine. We're gonna make it to Orlando just a-okay.
That's right. I tell people too who are nervous about flying, I said, when you're sitting in the back and you have a lot of turbulence bouncing you around and you're scared, just realize that the pilots are sitting up there talking about last night's baseball game, or, what they're going to do on that overnight. They're not worried about it at all. So
What would I don't even want to ask this because now I'll be paranoid, but what would worry a pilot in the front? Like when there's turbulence, in my head, when there was turbulence, people would start being like, oh, okay, now we gotta, take it off of cruise control and kind of stabilize things here. What would make them actually react?
So turbulence, and this is the way I want to describe it. Turbulence is like a pothole in the road. You may not see it coming. You just have to go through it, but it's not going to hurt your car. You know what I mean? I mean, really bad turbulence, you might like, throw out your alignment or something like that, but you're not going to crash. What would make us nervous is if like a wheel fell off, right? Or, like some major, like if you're driving a car and your wheel falls off, okay, now you have to handle something. And so in aviation, that's like losing an engine or having some sort of malfunction that's going to, limit what you normally do. So, but that's so rare, that doesn't happen that often. The good news is that's what we train to every single year when we go back for our annual training. Is we train to losing an engine on takeoff and having all these emergencies thrown at us. So even then, it's not very nerve wracking. It's just, okay, now I have to focus on that, as opposed to what how the Yankees did last night, or or anything like that.
We had another author on who used to be fly planes in the military and now flies commercial, and he was saying kind of a similar thing. It's just I said, like, does it get boring after flying? You were just talking about going, supersonic speeds and all this, that, and the other thing. It's like, does it get boring flying, whatever, again, Dallas to Orlando?
It can get boring, but that's why I think pilots who are self-critiquing, that kind of attitude, that we strive to do something just a little bit better than last time, like, okay, last time I was maybe a little bit higher than I wanted to be when I started this approach, and so I'm going to work on that. Or maybe I put my landing gear down too far out, and I ended up wasting a little bit of extra gas. And so we're always doing little things to try to improve every single flight. So it can get boring, but we find ways of keeping ourselves engaged and making it a safer, more efficient flight.
You became a novelist after a long military career. Was writing a way to leave that life behind or a way to stay close to it?
Hmm. I've never actually thought about it in that way. When I retired from the military, I one of the most common questions I was asked was, do you miss it? And I will say, no, I don't miss it at all, but I do miss the people. And I think you probably hear that quite often from veterans, that we don't miss the job, we don't miss time away from the family, we don't miss the sacrifice, but we miss hanging around with our friends. And so, yeah, I think writing has helped me in that way, because I can still turn to the pages of my books and still encounter, my friends, the people that I served with, and I recognize them in the characters that I write. So, yes, that does help, but I also don't want to tell stories strictly that are military. I want to tell stories that, kind of venture away from the military theme. And so I think being a storyteller, it's just in my nature to want to do.
Your first novel, Unknown Rider, launched the Battleborn series. What was the part of that book that felt most personal to you?
I think when And I mentioned earlier my JSOC deployment and being an enabler and seeing a lot of things that happen behind the scenes. When I set out to write the Battleborn series and Unknown Rider in particular, I wanted to show two different sides of our national defense. You have the military represented by Colt Bancroft, who's the fighter pilot, and he wears the uniform and straps on the jet and takes off into the skies. But then you have the supporting side, which was intelligence. And in this book, I used an NCIS counterintelligence agent, Punky King, and so she represents everything that goes on behind the scenes that you don't see, and the two of them have to work together. And so I think what felt personal to me was the way they worked together, even when they weren't physically in the same place. Both their missions were very important. And if one failed, the other one couldn't succeed. And it just kind of shows the how the military and how our national defense works. It's not just the door kickers. It's not just the person strapping into an F-18 or an F-35, but it's the maintainers that keep those jets up. It's the people that give you the intelligence on the targets you need to attack. It's everybody working together to make it happen. And so that's what felt personal to me about that story.
You have made a career on authenticity. Is there anything about the real military world that you deliberately leave out because it would be too hard or too ugly for readers?
Like I think before the Silent Horizon series, I think I really didn't talk about the emotional toll on the family. Again, partly because that your average civilian reader doesn't want to read about that. They want to read about the explosions and bullets flying and all that. But writing that series was very, I thought it was very healing for me personally, to kind of talk about the the PTSD and some of the mental health issues that veterans face, um, without it being trope. I didn't want there to be just some broken special operator that you know drinks a lot and does things because of his PTSD, and then he goes off and does something great. I wanted it to be meaningful. I wanted to there to be somebody who he's leaving behind and who's suffering and sacrificing for, and who's sacrificing in their own right. And so I personally feel like that's a very fresh take on it, but it's not one that I think I wanted to expose in the first series. But it's one that I think I'll probably always have in the back of my mind on everything moving forward.
It seems like people are, myself included, it's like so easy now because it's like war is so, like all the stuff, knock on wood, all the stuff the military is doing now is so far, it feels so far away, but really, like you're saying,
Yeah.
it's really not, because the families are your neighbors or in your communities or whatever. But it's a hard thing for like, it's hard to even realize sitting here today talking to you about it, about PTSD and how many people that affects and impacts the families and all that. I'm not sure if you've ever heard of Two Lamb or Ronan, but we've had him on a couple times, and he's talked a lot about PTSD and his own PTSD story. And it's
Yeah.
just like one of those things it's so easy to take for granted as a civilian.
And honestly, it's easy to take for granted when you're in the military too. I mean, for most of my career, people we didn't talk about mental health. We didn't talk about the sacrifices that you were making and how it was going to affect your mental health down the road. The common phrase was embrace the suck. Suck it up. You just had to get through it. People before you did it, you have to do it. You're going to live. And then later on, after 2 decades of war, we realized that this wasn't a very long term, healthy strategy for people to have. And so now you have 22 veterans a day, committing suicide. And towards the end of my career, fortunately, I saw a shift where it became, hey, people, let's check up on your bros. Hey, how you doing? Like it really brought mental health to the forefront. And so I'm thankful for that, but it is still, like you said, something that not everyone sees. We need to highlight more.
If you had a magic wand, I know this is a lot to put on you here and put you on the spot, but if you had a magic wand to help with the PTSD issue for, future soldiers, future veterans, all that, what would you do?
If I had a magic wand, I would eliminate war. Like that's the it sounds stupid, but that's the PTSD happens because we're asking humans to do unhuman like things. I mean, it's not natural to want to hurt another human. It's not natural to see your friend get blown up. I mean, that's not a natural thing. I wish our politicians really truly saw the true cost of it and not just a dollar figure. It's not just, soldiers aren't just widgets that we can just replace with another, which is how they've seen the military for years. I wish they could see the real human toll.
Have you ever, I'll butcher this stat, but there was some like political conference they were trying to raise awareness for like police, like what it's like to actually be a police officer. And they did like a simulation where they like have like a fake gun, but it's like a 3D immersive experience. And like how many politicians like pulled out their gun and shot the person. And it was I think it was everybody but one or something crazy. It's like you almost wish you could have something like that for the military, or maybe just more politicians with a military background. It might be the answer.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the near-term solution is to have more veterans serving in Congress. I think a longer-term solution would be to stop have term limits to keep people from staying in Congress for a long time and making money off of war, which is very profitable, unfortunately. And maybe I don't know, looking at the world differently than we do now.
We just recorded an episode with Senator Armstrong in Oklahoma, and we must have talked about term limits for like an hour of the whatever roughly 2 hour episode. I
Yeah.
fully agree. I think, and we looked it up. I think it was like 83% of Americans support it. I don't know why. Well, I do know why it hasn't happened yet, but I don't know how we can't get it through.
Yeah, because the people we like don't want it.
Yeah. There's other things like that too, like the whole insider trading stuff, and like
Yeah.
we all know it's happening. It's like, oh,
Yep.
it's not them, it's their spouse. Oh, okay. Never mind then. It's all okay. Give me a break.
Right. Yeah, it is pretty disappointing, but that's the world we live in.
Yeah.
There is another kind of responsibility in inherited worlds. You now write inside major worlds created by W.E.B. Griffin and Tom Clancy. What is the hardest part of taking responsibility for characters and readers that were there before you?
I think it's the same responsibility I feel as a parent, because God has given me this child, and I can either screw it up so poorly that child dies, ends up in prison or whatever, or I can do something really amazing with it and they can go do their own thing. And that's the responsibility I feel. And it sounds pretty heavy, but when their writings meant so much to me as a child and and growing up in the military, I want to make sure that I preserve that importance for future generations. And both are different. I mean, W.E.B. Griffin has a very unique style, and he focuses a lot on characters and their interpersonal relationships. And so I really wanted to spend a lot of time on that and making sure I got that right. But there have been so many other authors that have written Tom Clancy before me that fortunately the style has kind of evolved over the years that I didn't feel really compelled to follow what Tom Clancy did originally. But there are certain things that his characters will not do, that are basically counter to their ethics and their morals that are ingrained in them long before I picked up the mantle. So there are some guardrails to make sure that I don't screw up too bad, but it still is a pretty weighty proposition to know that I can either kill the series or maybe bring additional readers to it. So
You talked about being fans of both those authors you actually named specifically. What was that like when you got called and asked to write in those series?
For the W.E.B. Griffin series, it was the Presidential Agent series, which ironically was probably the one series I hadn't read of his, mainly because it all happened, it all came out after 9/11, and I was too busy deploying and to really read those books. But I was a big fan of his Brotherhood of War series and the Core, and so my first reaction was huge honor, absolutely yes, I would love to. And then it was immediately followed with, but I don't know anything about these characters. I don't know anything about this series, so I had to go back to book one and read through them again. And as I did that, I became more and more excited, and I think I feel very proud of the book that I put out in that series. And I think most of the feedback I've received from fans has been relatively positive as well. The Tom Clancy thing, it was I mean, once I started writing, it was my goal. I wanted to write for Tom Clancy, and so getting that call, it was very exciting. It wasn't as nerve wracking as I expected to be initially, but when I actually sat down and the first time I wrote Jack Ryan on the screen, I kind of paused and I just stared at it for a few minutes and went, "Holy cow, this is actually happening."
When success came, did it change how you saw yourself, or did you still feel like you had something to prove?
Oh, I'm still waiting for the success to come. Uh, but I think I think most authors suffer from imposter syndrome. I hear about it all the time. I just came back from a conference in New York, and some of the most successful novelists, with New York Times best-selling writers, they all suffer from this, where they think that the next book they put out is going to be the one where everyone discovers that they can't actually write, and I think that fear is what drives us to continue to try to improve, to try to get better, because we don't want people to think we're a fraud. We don't want people to think we don't belong, and so yeah, I think I don't consider myself successful yet. I don't know if I ever will, but I do consider myself a storyteller who wants to improve and get better every single time.
What do you think it would take if writing for your childhood kind of hero authors, if writing those series doesn't work? What do you think it would take?
Oh, I don't know. I see that again. This is the pilot in me, right? Where I'm being very self-critical, and my wife does have to remind me constantly, "Hey, look what you've accomplished. Be proud of what you've done. Be happy with what you've done." Otherwise, I'm constantly looking down the road and saying, "Okay, but I need to do this next. I need to do that next." So she's kind of keeping me in line a little bit.
Military thrillers can make danger exciting. Does it ever bother you that readers enjoy stories built from things that cost real people so much?
I've never thought of it that way. And I don't think it really does bother me, because I think that in my mind, when I was a kid growing up reading Tom Clancy, right, I learned a lot about the military through those books. So it's not like I'm trying to teach people through my writing, but I think if I'm exposing them to a world that they aren't aware of, that might make them naturally curious to learn more.
You have written about service, sacrifice, loyalty, and duty. I have found a lot of stability in my own life through faith in Jesus, and I am always interested in how others think about it. How does faith, in whatever form it takes for you, shape how you make sense of those things?
Faith is something that you either are going out and looking for books that to learn more about it, or it's going to sneak up on you and you're sort of going to discover it naturally. And so I most of my books have an element of faith throughout the storyline, and I want a reader to be curious about something. They might read something and say, "Huh, well, why does he feel that way? Well, let me look more into, the author's background, and then learn, like with my Silent Horizon series, maybe they're going to look and see, what Mighty Oaks Foundation is about, which is what Chad Robichaux founded to help veterans with PTSD from a faith-based perspective. And so I want them to be curious about it naturally, and so I do include it in all my writing.
For someone looking at your whole path, if a young person came to you and said they wanted your exact life, Navy, flying, combat, writing, and all of it, what would you warn them about first?
I would warn them about trying to follow in someone else's footsteps other than the one that God has set out in front of you. I've asked people, and throughout my career, I've asked them, "How would you do this?" And 99% of the people give me advice based on what they did. And what I learned is that the path worked for them because that was their path. It wouldn't work for me because it wasn't mine. And so I would just ask people to know what's important to them and to go after that, and just trust that you're on the right path and you're the one that God wants for you.
Jack, before we close, I always ask our guests to brag about their family for a minute. Please go ahead.
This is one thing that I'm very comfortable doing. I'm bragging about other people instead of myself. I've been married to the same woman for 22 years, and we have three wonderful children. Our oldest, Trey, is going to be a junior at Texas A&M University. He works for the Texas A&M Fighting Aggies football team, and he wants to go into professional sports, preferably the NFL. Wants to be a scout, and it's pretty awesome watching him accomplish that. My younger son William is graduating from high school and is going to Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University in Daytona Beach on a Navy ROTC scholarship, and he plans to reapply to the Naval Academy again for next year, because he wants to follow in my footsteps and be a Navy pilot. And then my daughter Rebecca is 13, and she is a cheerleader. She is a social butterfly, and she is everything I don't know how to deal with, but thankfully my wife does.
I think that's like every dad of all time, right?
I think so.
Now, on to our final word segment, where we ask our guests a few rapid fire questions. What was the happiest moment in your life?
I'm going to say the day I married my wife.
What is the biggest adversity you've faced?
I'd say the biggest adversity in becoming an author, I wrote 5 novels with multiple rejections for each before I finally found an agent. So it took quite a bit of time to get an agent.
What are you most excited about?
This sounds so bad, but I'm excited about my daughter graduating high school, and then my wife and I being able to travel more without being tied to their schedules. But that could be to visit them as well. So it's not like I want to get rid of my kids. I just want a little bit more freedom.
You just want to have the option to ditch them if you need
Yeah,
to.
exactly.
What advice would you give your younger self?
Never give up on your dreams.
Do you have any book recommendations for us or for the listeners?
Yes, Unknown Rider, which is the first book in my Battleborn series. I think it's a very fun read, and it's the start of a series, so I'd recommend that.
The name of our podcast is Nothing Left Unsaid. Do you have anything you want to say?
No, I'm thankful that you guys gave me an opportunity to come on and to talk about my experience in the military and writing stories, and especially that you're not shy about talking about faith and what it means to me.
All right, so before we let you go, last question I ask every guest is, now that you got to know us and the show a little bit, who are a couple of recommendations you have for future guests?
I think Josh would be a very good person to have on. He's a writer, former 82nd Airborne paratrooper. He does some writing in the Arma video game. He does the writing for them now, but he's also a novelist. He would be a good one. Andrews and Wilson, Brian Andrews, Jeff Wilson. They do a lot for veterans, veteran organizations, and they both have really good stories to tell as well. Those are the top 2.
Jack, thank you for joining us. Your work sits at the intersection of service, imagination, duty, and memory. These stories entertain people, but they also carry pieces of a world most readers will never see up close. We appreciate your time, your honesty, and your willingness to talk about what sits beneath the stories. May God bless you and your family.
Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for coming on. Thanks for your service. Appreciate you.
My pleasure.